Welcome back into the Daily Dose. I'm your host, Jeff Hansen. As always, the show is brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Thank you so much for your support of the channel. If you haven't done so yet, hit the subscribe button, like this video, leave us a comment. All of those interactions help us grow this platform. The interactions, the support, the subscriptions, all those things have been absolutely astonishing to me over the course of the first month and a half of this platform. So thank you for your support so far, and thank you in advance for your continued support and for continuing to subscribe to the Daily Dose. Today, we're talking recruiting once again because it's June. That's what happens. And two, it's a really big recruiting weekend for BYU, and things get started tomorrow. BYU will host a number of official visitors, mostly from the state of Utah, and it could be a really, really big weekend. If things go well, it could be one of the best recruiting weekends that BYU's ever had. If things don't go well, it could be a really difficult pill to swallow as BYU moves forward with the class of 2024. So let's get into it. Let's talk about who these visitors are and kind of where things are at with their recruiting. First and foremost, Faletau Satawala out of Bountiful High School. Satawala is a special, special athlete. I've seen him play multiple times, and he is as fluid as anybody else is in the state of Utah. If he was playing at one of the bigger Salt Lake or Utah County schools, I think a lot of people are very familiar with his name and are talking about him all the time. But he's tucked away at Bountiful High School, stayed a little bit under the radar. Despite that, he's near four-star. He's got offers from everywhere from Tennessee to USC and a bunch of schools in between. He's a really, really good player. BYU would love to have him. Right now, he's taken official visits to UCLA and to Utah. Most people think that Utah is the leader in the clubhouse, and that's probably fair. There's a number of family connections and ties and things that would connect Satawala and Utah, but BYU is a factor here, and they do get the last shot before he's expected to make a decision sometime next month. Coach Hill has done a great job recruiting Satawala and getting BYU back into the mix. Is it enough to steal him away from Utah or UCLA in the end? We'll see, but BYU's got a really good opportunity in front of them with a big official visitor weekend, and Coach Hill's as good as it gets when it comes to relationships like that. Number two, American Forks Davis Andrews, arguably the top defensive prospect on BYU's board at this point. Andrews can play. I mean, he plays safety. Maybe he plays linebacker at the next level, but he can play. He's a football player, and that's all that you really need to know about what Davis Andrews brings to the table. There's a reason that schools like UCLA and Notre Dame, Tennessee, Stanford, Utah, I mean, everybody has been after Davis Andrews. Right now, it looks like it's kind of a three-horse race as we get near the finish line between Utah, Notre Dame, and BYU. Coach Hill, once again, has done a phenomenal job getting BYU back into the conversation and making them a factor in Davis Andrews' ultimate decision. I don't know if BYU wins out in the end, but I know that 6 months ago, BYU really wasn't talked about, really wasn't thought about, and really wasn't under much consideration at all. But Coach Hill, Coach Enna, they've done a great job of getting BYU back into the mix. And with a strong weekend this weekend, BYU could pull off an upset. Notre Dame, it's going to be really, really difficult to beat. They did a great job on their official visit. And then Utah, he grew up a Utah fan. That's obviously a big pull there as well. But BYU's done a great job, and there's other factors at play here that might draw Davis Andrews to Provo that most people really aren't talking about. Number three, he kind of just went public with this last night. Cash Dillon out of Corner Canyon High School will be at BYU this weekend. Cash is awesome. I mean, Cash is just a phenomenal football player. When you see him play, it's astonishing the things that he's able to do at his size. He's such a fluid athlete. I was at a showcase a few weeks ago, and I watched Cash Dillon play an hour and a half of tight end. He was taking nearly every rep. He was gassed, and he was exhausted. And after he was done taking reps at tight end, it was time for line play with defensive line and offensive line. And Cash, although he was exhausted, flipped around and took every rep at defensive end, going up against four-star offensive tackles. And he won his fair share of battles, even though he was exhausted. This kid is a very special football player. I think it's down to BYU or Utah for Cash Dillon. And kind of like Davis Andrews, a few months ago, BYU really wasn't much of a consideration. Coach Papinga has done a spectacular job working with Cash, forming a relationship. There's been a ton of unofficial visits, a ton of communication. I don't think this is a done deal to Utah, although that seems like that's probably the common belief. But I think BYU is much more in it than people want to give them credit for, and I think Coach Papinga is a large reason as to why. Number 4, Ephraim Asiata. Yes, an Asiata will be visiting BYU. So at minimum, you're going to see an Asiata have a photo shoot with BYU Blue on. And that's something that you didn't think would ever happen when Matt Asiata was running around at Utah. Look, Ephraim Asiata is the son of Matt Asiata. Of course, Utah is going to be a huge factor here. But Kalani Sitake is really close with the Asiata family. They've been on him for a very long time. I would put my money on Utah for Ephraim Asiata. But hey, Kalani Sitake has pulled off some pretty crazy things in the past on the recruiting trail. Maybe he's able to get Ephraim down to Provo. Jet Nelson is another American Fork product that we're not talking enough about. He's listed as a tight end, and I know that people are going to look at tight end and Jet Nelson and say, well, BYU already has Reiner Swanson, and there's already other guys in the pipeline. Think of Jet Nelson as a football player. He may end up playing tight end. He might end up playing a big-bodied wide receiver, kind of in that Neil Pau'u mold. He could play linebacker or defensive end. He's just a football player. He could do a lot of things. Jet's relatively new to the game of football, so he's still discovering really who he is on the field. But he's 6'5", he's 215 pounds, and he can do just about anything. He's got great hands on the offensive side of the ball, and he's got physical hands on the defensive side of the ball. Coach Jay Hill saw him, offered him nearly immediately after watching him play on the evaluation circuit at some of the spring ball practices at American Fork. And I think that Jet Nelson is a guy that the BYU coaching staff is very, very excited about, and they are happy that he is still flying relatively under the radar. I've seen Jet play a handful of times as well. And the kid can play. There's no question about it. The kid can play. Carson Tsue out of Granger High School. Of course, he's listed as a quarterback, and he's going to play quarterback. He's going to have a shot to play quarterback at the college level, but there's going to be a fight if he goes to BYU because the defensive coaches see a ball-hawking safety or a big physical outside linebacker who could do a lot of things. They would want him to play defense as well, and he's got a big frame. He's got the genes that he could grow into a defensive player for sure. From Tsue's standpoint, I'm sure he'd like to play quarterback, but he is open to any position. His biggest priority is, will a school honor his mission? And of course, BYU will do that. Tsue is a very good football player. Again, athletes. That's kind of the theme of this official visitor weekend. BYU is recruiting athletes, not guys that are pigeonholed into one dedicated position, but guys who are athletic enough that maybe they have one position they're really good at today, but they could grow into a number of different positions. That versatility, that ability to be multiple, that's a big deal for Jay Hill on the defensive side of the ball. And it's always been something that's important for Aaron Roderick. He loves his multi-sport athletes on the offensive side of the ball. So that's what we're looking at with Carson Tsue. He could even play wide receiver. I mean, he's just uber athletic. But don't let anybody fool you. The kid can sling it. He's still a little bit raw, needs to work on his accuracy, but he can make all the throws that he needs to make. Carson Tsue could be a very, very good quarterback as well. The last 2 official visitors on the list, still up in the air a little bit, but I feel confident enough saying that I think they're going to be there this weekend. First is Orem High's Roger Saleapaga. Of course, he's a tight end. He's got offers from everybody. In terms of a recruiting profile, Saleapaga looks a lot like Reiner Swanson. 4-star guy, offers a national recruit in every sense of the word. The common belief has been that he's looking outside of the state of Utah. Utah has done a great job as well, but schools like Tennessee have kind of seemed like they might be the front runner. But I said a few weeks ago that Steve Clark is BYU's best recruiter, and I maintain that statement, that belief today. Steve Clark is BYU's best recruiter. Saleapaga told me just this week he talks with BYU every single day. The relationship is there. It's strong. He's the little brother, of course, of Keanu Saleapaga, who played at BYU. He's at Orem High School. BYU's not far. The Saleapaga family knows Kalani Sitake and his program and knows it very well. They know Aaron Roderick. And there's a lot of reasons that Roger Saleapaga could end up at BYU and kind of shock the world. Will it happen? I don't know. But right now he's going on an official visit, barring some last-minute changes. And once you get a guy on an official visit, anything can happen. So that's a huge first step for BYU. And lastly, West High School's Nuku Mafi. He just recently received a BYU offer. But I think that he could. I think that he could, depending on schedules. They were trying to get him to BYU this weekend, and Nuku was trying to make his scheduling work. If he wasn't going to come this weekend, then he wanted to come maybe early next week before the dead period starts. But we'll see what happens with Nuku Mafi. He wants to come to BYU, so I think they'll find a way to squeeze him into this official visit. He's just a big road grader of an offensive lineman. I kind of like him as a defensive tackle. I think he's got a lot of those skills as well. But most are recruiting him to play offensive line, probably an interior offensive line. Nuku Mafi's very, very good. Schools like Nebraska have been on him. There's a bunch of different Power 5 schools across the country that are in on Nuku Mafi. So getting him to BYU for an official is a great first step for the Cougars. Most of these guys are looking at I guess even a June or a July decision. Most of these guys want to end the recruiting process, focus on their senior year, and be done with it. So they've taken a lot of official visits, and BYU kind of gets the last hurrah. Think of this as that last big official visit in the glory days, that last weekend in January before February signing day on the first Wednesday in February. The way that the calendar has kind of works itself out now, kids could take official visits in the month of June, and kids who want to make an early decision, they tend to do so at the end of June, first week of July, kind of around the 4th. And so this is kind of that last official visit weekend. Dead period starts in July, so there will be no more official visits until the season starts, really until September. So it's a big weekend for BYU. A lot of these guys in the past, I would have told you as a BYU fan, don't get your hopes up. They're going to Utah. Coach Hill, Coach Papinga, Coach Enna, Coach Puha, I cannot sing their praises enough. They have put BYU into the conversation. Coach Kalani is involved with a handful of these guys as well. And the offensive coaches have always done their things. And so they're big factors there for any offensive guy. But on the defensive side of the ball, BYU would have been eliminated along, with the previous coaching staff. They just would have. But I think BYU is in a very good position that there at least is a recruiting battle. I don't know if BYU is going to win any of these guys. I know they won't win all of these guys, but I think that there is a battle, and that's progress as a BYU fan. Think of the recruiting calendar. BYU was playing from behind, having a new coaching staff come in December and January. That's already at the tail end of the recruiting cycle. Now they have enough time to make up ground, but they were playing from behind, and that's important to understand and to realize. But I think that there's a conversation to be had about BYU winning at least a couple of these recruiting battles over the course of the next couple of weeks. And it starts with this big official visit weekend this weekend. Thank you for your support of the Daily Dose. And until next time, give them hell.